today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about why people avoid conflict and the hidden consequences of avoiding conflict. Individual purpose and growth and change are scientifically proven to be interconnected in relationship. Disagreements are the opportunity to create something new, not the opportunity to shred the marriage apart. It's an opportunity to grow closer. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about avoiding the fight, how the fear of conflict breeds disconnection. And this is, I think, the sixth or seventh in a series we're doing on disconnection. Disconnection is unbelievably prevalent in marriages across the United States, and I would argue around the world. This is a super important topic if what you're looking for is intimacy in your marriage. I'm curious, do you sometimes, or maybe frequently, avoid difficult conversations, fearing that having the conversation is going to make it worse? Does silence feel safe in the moment? Well, I want you to know that it slowly erodes trust and connection, all right? In the moment, silence may feel safe, but in the long run, it erodes trust and connection. Why? Because even though the old adage is silence is golden, the truth is that gold is cold, right? Relationships, partnerships, loving partnerships are warm and nurturing. And part of nurturing means making a little noise. Not a lot, a little noise. I want you to imagine a relationship where disagreements are opportunities. Disagreements are the opportunity to create something new, not the opportunity to shred the marriage apart. It's an opportunity to grow closer rather than a reason to drift apart. It starts with learning how to deal with disagreements together. And why is it so vital? Because the truth is, a partnership is made up of two people who have individual strengths in different areas. And when people have expertise, I'm going to call it, in different areas, and they partner together because they want to honor the expertise their partner brings in, and they also want their own expertise to be honored. When they partner for those reasons, but difference isn't aired out, frustration builds up. When they partner for those reasons and difference isn't aired out, fear grows. When they partner for those reasons and difference isn't aired out, there is no growth. In fact, the relationship will go backwards. Silence will take the relationship backwards. If you're not moving towards intimacy, you are moving away from it. What are the roots of conflict avoidance? It starts out really as something that we all consider very reasonable, right? Nobody wants to have destructive conflict. And part of what I want to communicate to you here is the resolution of difference is not the same. Resolution of difference is not the same as destructive conflict, but we've come to fear destructive conflict so much that we don't air out difference and therefore don't have the opportunity to have creative resolution. Does the thought of conflict make you freeze, fearing judgment or rejection? Avoidance can feel like protection, but what it leaves ultimately are current and old wounds unhealed. And in the last episode, we talked a lot about how most destructive conflict is fueled by old unresolved emotions and strategies from our past that worked, the strategies that worked to avoid those painful experiences back then, but they don't work now. What if understanding why you avoid conflict could unlock the ability to approach disagreements with courage and clarity? And I'm not talking about the theoretical reason of why you avoid conflict. I'm talking about the reason why you avoid conflict. Get that I am not giving you this podcast so you can go to your partner and say, hey, you're conflict avoidant. I'm giving you this podcast so that you can look in the mirror and start to clean up whatever avoidance is going on your side. Or maybe you're not avoidant. Maybe you love conflict. Maybe the problem is that you love it too much. The problem is that you love the energy of the frustration. Well, creative disagreement resolution does not live in anger, blame, and frustration, right? and we've said multiple times on this podcast, anger's a great starter motor, but you want to start the bigger motor, which is your conscious mind, with that energy. You don't want to just run your life on that anger. And many of us make the mistake of bringing up difference with our starter motor and not letting the bigger engine kick in. Things that drive conflict avoidance are fear of rejection, judgment, or escalation. So let's take those one at a time. Fear of rejection is almost a universal human experience. Did you know that one of the number one fears that human beings have is the fear of public speaking? And the fear of public speaking is all about fear of rejection. Very often, we will avoid sharing a hurt, a sadness, or a fear with our partner because that hurt, sadness, or fear is grounded in some deep personal wound. And we're afraid if they see that, they won't love us anymore. And we forget that when we were at the in-love stage, they saw everything about us and still loved us. Instead, we revert back to the time when that wound occurred and the people we were with at that time. And the reason why that wound occurred with those people at that time is that they did not accept us. They thought we should be someone different. They thought maybe there was something wrong with that expression of who we are, and criticized us, punished us, attacked us. So when it comes up with our partner, who's already let us know that they love us, farts, warts, and all, the fear that's coming up is 80% past, 10, 20% current. And if we've been having an experience where we've been fighting a lot, there's been a lot of experience of rejection, that's going to intensify it. Who's going to feel safe in that environment? What comes with that is concern about judgment. And I want to be really clear. It's not so much, well, we might be afraid of the judgment of others, but what's really dangerous is our own judgment. We judge our partner as being X, Y, and Z. It's unsafe to have disagreement with them. But every time we judge someone else, we are judging ourselves. Judgment is kind of like a two-dimensional picture. It's like a photograph. A judgment is like a photograph, but human beings are holograms, all right? And human beings exist throughout time and space, not just in the moment. So in the moment, someone might show up as a certain way, but in the span of their life, that's not all of who they are. But in that moment, we will judge them as being a certain way, especially if we have an old wound that was inflicted by someone who showed up that way. We start to see them as being that way. In the last episode, I gave an example from my own childhood where my wife used to show up like my parents when we had disagreements as sort of unrelentless, when really what she was kind of desperate. I'd be withdrawing and she'd be desperately pursuing. I'd be withdrawing because I was, oh my God, here, it's them again. They're coming after me. And she'd be pursuing because she'd be like, oh my God, it's them again. They're not giving me the attention I need. So we would both slip into judgment about the behavior. And the judgment was, her judgment of my behavior was based on her history, and my judgment of her behavior was based on my history. And neither judgment was 100% accurate. Judgment is, we need judgment in order to walk upstairs. You know, we judge the height of the stairs, for example. Judgment's important, but there are times when our judgment is colored by previous experiences, old emotions that are unreleased, unexpressed, old assumptions that haven't been explored and let go of. When our judgment is colored by those things, the step can look like it's 10 inches tall instead of 6 inches tall. In fact, I would argue that when you go upstairs and trip, it's because something is getting in the way of your judgment, of your proper judgment. So we've talked about fear of rejection. We've talked about judgment. Fear of escalation is pretty huge. When we see that something isn't working, particularly if we see that a conflict that we've been having with our partner is impacting our children, and we don't want it to impact our children. Maybe it worked before we had children, but we want to protect our children from that. Then we become particularly fearful about escalation. And I would argue even that this is reasonable to an extent, right? If you are in negative conflict, you do not want to escalate the negative conflict, the destructive conflict. However, avoiding calling out difference and resolving difference completely is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. All right. The temporary problem is that you're having a disagreement that's turning into destructive conflict. A permanent solution is we're never going to talk about disagreements. When in fact, you could be figuring out what's the judgment, what's the rejection, what's the old emotion, what's driving this. The trick is to get that most of what happens when we're in conflict is on automatic. When we're in destructive conflict, our amygdala has kicked in, an amygdala hijack has occurred. We see danger, we react to the danger, fight, flight, or play dead. There's very little conscious mind there. And so the interrupt is to start recognizing that the situation isn't as dangerous as your amygdala has decided that it is. Your amygdala has decided it's dangerous because to your unconscious mind, it looks like something in the past that was really hurtful or painful that's unresolved. And so your amygdala goes from 0 to 10. But if we recognize that that's not true consciously, and we start to put in conscious practices, we start to become intentional about how we're going to handle our triggers. The first thing we do is we start to not allow our triggers to move us, though they're present, and then eventually we can get rid of the triggers themselves. We can move from maintaining the status quo to protect ourselves from perceived threats to altering the status quo to eliminate our perception of threat so that we can continue to grow relationally. Do unresolved issues feel like a weight between you and your partner, creating distance you don't know how to bridge? Recognizing these patterns can be the first step to breaking free and reconnecting in meaningful ways. That's what we're about here. We want to recognize that there is a pattern here, a pattern that is destructive to us and to our relationship. The avoidance is part of that pattern. The other part of the pattern is the destructive conflict itself. There's actually two patterns. If you're avoiding it, there's two patterns. Or it might be one big pattern with intermingled parts, depending on how you look at it. We want to recognize it because the first step in resolving any problem is recognizing that you have it. When differences stop being aired or addressed, we start leading parallel lives. Gray divorce is higher right now than it's ever been. Gray divorce is where the kids go off to college and the parents get divorced. And the reason for that is the parents have only focused on the things they agree about, which is, all right, we're going to make sure our kids are fed. We're going to make sure that they're clothed. We're going to make sure that they have shelter. We're going to make sure that they know that we both individually love them. We're going to make sure that they are well educated. We're going to make sure that they have friends. We're going to make sure that they go to a good school. And then we're going to launch them. And then the kids get launched. And suddenly the parents notice that they no longer have a shared purpose. Their whole purpose has been the children instead of the relationship, because the relationship itself was too dangerous. Talking about the relationship brought up all kinds of scary, old, hurtful emotions that they just wanted to avoid. And then they get divorced. You know what? Too much water under the bridge. I don't want to be married to this person. Unmet needs lead to frustration, loneliness, and resentment. Frustration, loneliness, and resentment lead to either getting help or getting divorced. If you're living parallel lives where you're coexisting without true connection, or your only focus is your children, I'm challenging you to look at that. Don't just keep doing it unconsciously. Look at it. And actually, I want you to think about what is the lesson you're teaching your children. People who are leading parallel lives for the sake of their children often don't see that they are modeling a dysfunctional form of relationship to their children. Individual purpose and growth and change are scientifically proven to be interconnected in relationship. When we try and identify our sense of purpose and try and drive change individually on our own, we have very little success compared to when we have a partner. The true purpose of marriage is not continuing the species. The true purpose of a partnership, a loving partnership that we call marriage, is individual development, a sense of growth in individual purpose, and individual fulfillment. And in order to drive that individual sense of growth and purpose and fulfillment, we create this corporation with the other person, and the structure of the corporation is our marriage vows, and the purpose of the corporation is to have a happy and fulfilling life as individuals and as partners. When we slip into parallel lives, what we're teaching our children is people are objects to be used and then discarded. When we have a loving relationship based in partnership, based in a belief that we're contributing to a greater good, not just our children, but a greater good, that we are making a difference by fulfilling our individual purpose, by fulfilling our marital purpose. We are making a difference, not just for ourselves, but for those around us, not just for our kids, but for our extended family, not just for our extended family, but for our community, not just for our community, but for the world. That is when we are fulfilling the true purpose of marriage. And when we live that way, it's unbelievably fulfilling. I'm telling you that you may be experiencing disconnection right now, but it does not have to be like that. You could be springboarding your individual personal growth through springboarding your relational growth. The two are codependent in a good way. All right, so let's just be clear. What is the difference between healthy conflict and harmful conflict, or what I've been calling difference resolution versus destructive conflict? Difference resolution, or healthy conflict, is engaged in expressing our points of view as ours, in expressing our emotions in a way that's responsible. We've recommended I statements to people. We've recommended committed listening to people as ways of doing this. Committed listening is a way that we can show mutual respect, listen, make sure that we're really hearing what the other person is saying, right? In a healthy discourse or dialogue, really, in a healthy dialogue, we're making sure that we really understand what the other person is saying, because sometimes our own stuff comes up and we hear something different than what they intended, and vice versa. In harmful conflict, we are deciding about what they've said before they even finish talking, because we know this stuff. We go to blame, we get loud, or we shut down or withdraw, depending on how we're wired. We run away. In healthy difference resolution, we create opportunities for deeper trust and understanding, greater intimacy. We create new possibilities in solving problems that we approach differently, a possibility that neither one of us would have come up on our own. There is a synergy in this kind of relationship. In destructive conflict, we shut down possibility, we withdraw, and we slip into parallel lives. Do you feel stuck or unsure about how to address disagreements without making things worse? Small changes, intentional changes in how you communicate will transform conflict into connection. If you're really feeling shut down, I'm going to strongly suggest some tools to start out. Work with I statements. An I statement structure is I'm feeling X when the situation, because. Now, the because is what is it within me that drives that feeling, not because you're an effing jerk. All right? So it might go like this. I feel threatened when you bring up my clothes being on the floor, because when I was a kid, my mom used to ream me for putting my clothes on the floor, so it bringing up some of my old stuff. That's an I, when, because statement that's responsible. The opposite of that would be, I feel scared when you criticize me for leaving my clothes on the floor because you are so blaming and controlling. That's the opposite. All right. So what we're used to doing is saying something more like this, by the way. Stop blaming me and criticizing me. When you do that, I feel scared. I feel angry. You make me feel scared or angry. That's the opposite of an I statement. The difference is, in an I statement, we feel personally empowered because we're stating our emotion and what it is in us in this situation that's bringing that emotion up, transparency. But we're also owning it's our emotion. I'm managing that emotion. Whereas in the blame statement, we're attributing to them that the feeling we're having. It's their fault. They're making us feel it. we're also giving away our personal power unconsciously. All of a sudden, they become much more powerful than they actually are. So you want to start with tools like that. And you want to start on the other end, even if your partner's being blaming, look for one thing, one fact, and one feeling in what they're saying. So in the blame example I gave you, I hate it when you're criticizing me because my clothes are on the floor. You make me feel so angry. If they said something like that to you, you would say, it sounds like you're feeling angry because I'm bringing up, because yeah, it sounds like you're feeling angry. It sounds like when I bring up the clothes being on the floor, you feel angry, right? That's just, and they're either going to say, yes, that's it. Or they're going to say, no, that's not it. It's the way you bring it up. You bring it up in a way that's critical. You're telling me how to live, da 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 da. And then you do it again. You say, okay, it sounds like you're angry because you feel that I brought up the way that the clothes ended up in the floor. And they say, yes, that's it. Or you just keep doing it until they say, yes, that's it. Right? Your goal here is not to be right. Your goal is to communicate to them that you hear them. You're not making them wrong. You're not agreeing with them. You're not disagreeing with them. You're not making yourself wrong or right. Agreeing with it. You're just showing that you hear their point of view. So that these are the tools. And then use these tools with small things, like the clothes on the floor or the dishes in the dishwasher, or something that feels not so too dangerous. I want you to do this with the thought that you're going to start to reframe disagreement as an opportunity for growth. And in the beginning, I don't want you to seek out a creative resolution. Just seek to hear and be heard. Just start with that. And then come back to it, maybe a day later, and say, when we were talking about the clothes on the floor thing, I'd love to come up with a way to address the situation where we'll both be satisfied. What do you think about that? In fact, a lot of times an I statement goes like this: I feel scared or hurt or afraid when you bring up my clothes being on the floor because my mom used to belittle me all the time for my clothes being on the floor. Could we talk about this in an hour? That's a more typical I statement. Try that with some small things first. Set aside regular time for uninterrupted conversation to create safe space on really basic, simple things, and expand out. If you're feeling absolutely jammed up, if the idea of that is absolutely terrifying, I want you to feel free to reach out and schedule a call with me, richinrelationship.com. Get a free call with me, and I'll talk you through it. Well, we'll baby step our way towards that. It might be that your things are so scary that you need to take an even smaller step. Does the fear of being hurt keep you from sharing your true feelings with your partner? By embracing vulnerability in baby steps, you can rebuild trust. And by rebuilding trust, you can create a safe space. And when you have a safe space, that's when intimacy, and I'm not just talking about sex, I'm talking about feeling close emotionally, can return. So remember, the steps are to learn to share openly and respectfully, to commit to consistency and communication, and to work towards vulnerability. And there's probably going to be some old emotions that we need to let go of along the way. And I'm happy to help you with that. Just remember, conflict isn't the problem. Disagreement isn't the problem. Disagreement is actually the solution. Disconnection is the actual problem. When you learn to jump into disagreement with love and respect, your relationship is going to be stronger and more fulfilling. And just so you know, next episode, we're going to introduce how unresolved conflicts and avoidance can lead to emotional exhaustion and relationship disconnection. Thank you again for listening. I hope you have really enjoyed this. Have a wonderful day and an awesome tomorrow.